Maria Chen vanished from Central Park in 2008. 12 years later, what her mother confessed shocked everyone. I will never forget the morning Maria walked back into her mother's arms. 12 years. 4,380 days of searching, praying, and losing hope. But here is what nobody understood until that misty October morning in Central Park. The little girl everyone thought was gone forever had been living just 8 miles away in Astoria, Queens, the entire time. 8 miles. She had been that close the whole time. A pink shoelace. That is what started everything in 2008. A small, muddy pink shoelace left on the grass near Bethesda Fountain, still tied in the double knot her grandmother had taught her. 6-year-old Maria Chen disappeared during a family picnic, and what investigators discovered 12 years later would prove that sometimes missing children cases hold secrets so dark, so twisted, that the truth is more shocking than any theory investigators could imagine. But I am getting ahead of myself. Because before Maria came home, before the shocking revelation that would make national headlines, before her mother's knees buckled on that cold morning when she heard a voice she thought she would never hear again, there was an ordinary Sunday afternoon, the smell of hot dogs and freshly cut grass, the sound of children laughing. And one single moment, when everything changed. What happened in those 12 years? Where was she? How did a child vanish from the most watched park in America? And why did the person responsible walk freely past her family dozens of times, smiling, helping with search parties, even comforting her devastated mother while hiding the darkest secret imaginable? Stay with me. Because this story of child disappearance is not just about a missing child found alive. It is about the haunting truth that sometimes the monster is not a stranger lurking in the shadows. Sometimes it is the person who seems safe, the person who seems caring, the person you would never suspect. And sometimes miracles do happen, but they come with a price no family should ever have to pay. This is the true crime story of Maria Chen. A case that proves hope can survive even the darkest mystery. A case that shows how vanished kids can be hidden in plain sight for over a decade. But first, you need to understand what New York City looked like on that perfect Sunday afternoon in May 2008, when a little girl in a yellow sundress vanished without a trace from the most famous park in the world.
Her mother had no idea she was about to live every parent's worst nightmare, and she definitely did not know that the person who would take Maria was already watching them from the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. May 18th. 2008. The kind of Sunday that makes you believe in perfect moments. Temperature hitting 72 degrees, cherry blossoms still clinging to the trees around Bethesda Fountain, and Central Park packed with families celebrating Mother's Day weekend. Over 15,000 people would pass through that section of the park that day. 15,000 potential witnesses, and yet somehow a child would disappear without a single person seeing exactly what happened. Maria Chen was 6 years old. Exactly 6 years, 2 months, and 11 days old, to be precise. Her mother, Linda Chen, would later tell investigators she remembered every detail of that morning, because it was supposed to be special. It was supposed to be the day Maria finally learned to ride her bike without training wheels. They had brought the pink bicycle with them, training wheels already removed, ready for Maria's big moment. But Maria never got on that bike, and by sunset, her name would be everywhere, on every news channel. Every police radio, every parent's worst nightmare whispered in the dark. The bike would sit in the Chen family garage for 12 years, untouched, waiting for a little girl who would never come home to ride it. Let me tell you about Maria Chen before she became a missing child case, before she became a statistic in the cold cases file, before her face appeared on milk cartons and billboards and became one of those haunting stories that true crime obsessives would dissect for years, before she was just another name in the database of vanished kids. Maria was obsessed with purple. Purple shoes, purple backpack, purple hair clips shaped like butterflies. Her teacher at PS 334 Elementary School, Mrs. Patricia Morrison, would later describe her as the girl who asked 1,000,000 questions and gave 1,000,000 hugs. She had a gap between her front teeth that made her smile unforgettable, a constellation of freckles across her nose that Linda used to call her star map. She carried a stuffed white rabbit named Mr. Whiskers everywhere. Everywhere. That rabbit had been with her since she was 2 years old. It smelled like baby powder and had a missing button eye that Maria refused to let anyone replace because As she said, Mr. Whiskers could still see just fine with one eye. Her father, David Chen, owned a small bakery in Chinatown called Chen's Golden Dragon Bakery. He made the best sesame buns in Manhattan, or so the locals claimed. Lines would form every morning at 5 a.m. for his fresh egg tarts and pineapple buns. Her mother, Linda, worked as a pediatric nurse at Mount Sinai Hospital. She specialized in working with sick children, which made what happened to her own daughter even more heartbreaking.
They were the kind of family that investigators would later call low risk, stable home, loving parents, no custody disputes, no criminal connections, no financial problems, nothing that would explain what was about to happen. They were, by every measure, a normal, happy family living a normal, happy life in New York City. That Sunday morning, the Chun family arrived at Central Park around 10:47 a.m. Security cameras would later confirm the exact times. You could see them on the grainy footage. David carrying the cooler, Linda holding Maria's hand, Kevin, Maria's 12-year-old brother, dragging the pink bicycle behind them. They looked happy, relaxed, completely unaware that they were being watched. Maria wore a yellow sundress with white daisies that Linda had bought her the week before at Macy's. Receipt number 47923. Saved in Linda's wallet for 12 years. White sandals with those pink shoelaces her grandmother had given her for her birthday. Grandmother Chun had come from Taiwan to visit and spent an afternoon teaching Maria how to tie special knots that would never come undone. And she carried Mr. Whiskers tucked under her left arm, his one-button eye facing forward as always. They set up their picnic near Bethesda Terrace, about 50 yards from the fountain. Linda spread out a blue checkered blanket that they had had since Kevin was a baby. David unpacked sandwiches, cut fruit, juice boxers, cookies shaped like stars that Maria had helped him bake the night before. Maria's older brother, Kevin, who was 12 at the time, plugged in his headphones and pulled out a comic book. 10 Men, issue number 493. He would remember that detail forever. The last comic book he read before his sister disappeared. Just a normal family. Just a normal day. Tourists taking photos, street performers juggling, couples holding hands, dogs chasing frisbees, the soundtrack of a perfect New York Sunday, except for one thing that Linda would remember for the rest of her life. Linda Chun would later tell police that she felt watched. She could not explain it. Just a feeling, that prickle on the back of your neck when someone is staring. That ancient survival instinct that warns you when something is not right. She remembered looking around, scanning the crowd of families and joggers and street performers, but she saw nothing unusual, nothing that raised an alarm. Just hundreds of people enjoying a beautiful day. She brushed it off, called it paranoia, called it the overprotective mother syndrome that her friends teased her about, went back to cutting apple slices for her daughter. That decision would haunt her for the next 12 years. That moment of dismissing her instinct. That choice to ignore the warning her body was screaming at her. In her darkest moments, Linda would replay that feeling over and over, wondering what would have happened if she had listened, if she had packed up their things right then, if she had taken Maria home. But she did not. Because how could she know? How could anyone know that among those 15,000 people enjoying Central Park that day, one person was there for a very specific purpose? One person had been planning this moment for months. One person was about to destroy their lives forever. At 11:23 a.m., Maria asked if she could go watch the street performers near the fountain. There was a magician doing card tricks, a man with a trained parrot, an acrobat doing flips, the kind of entertainment that draws crowds of children like moths to light. Her mother could see the area clearly from where they sat, 73 steps away. Linda counted them later, over and over walking that same path, until security guards gently asked her to leave, until she wore a trail in the grass from her grief. 73 steps, less than 30 seconds of running, close enough to hear if Maria screamed, close enough to see if something went wrong. "Stay where I can see you," Linda told her daughter. "And do not talk to strangers. Remember what we practiced? What do you do if someone you do not know tries to talk to you? I run back to you. Mommy?" Maria recited the safety rules they had practiced 100 times. "I do not go anywhere with anyone unless you say it is okay. Even if they say you sent them, even if they say that is an emergency. I come find you first. Gee. Good. Linda kissed the top of her daughter's head. Go watch the magic show. I will be right here. Maria nodded, clutching Mr. Whiskers, and skipped toward the fountain in her yellow sundress. The last image Linda would have seared into her brain forever. Her daughter's black hair bouncing as she skipped, the yellow sundress bright as sunshine against the gray stone of the terrace. One white sandal slightly untied, the pink lace dragging on the ground. Linda watched her daughter join the crowd around the magician, watched her laugh and clap when the magician pulled a dove from his hat, watched her turn and wave, making sure Mom was still watching. Linda waved back. That was the last time Linda Chen saw her daughter's face clearly. The last time she heard her laugh, the last time Maria was just Maria, a 6-year-old girl watching a magic show, and not a haunting mystery that would consume thousands of investigators, volunteers, and true crime obsessives for over a decade. What happened in the next 17 minutes would change everything. Not just for the Chen family, but for how the NYPD handles child abduction cases, for how we think about stranger danger, for how we understand that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who do not look dangerous at all. At 11:40 a.m., Linda Chen looked up from slicing strawberries and realized she could not see her daughter. The street performers were still there. The crowd was still there. The yellow sundress was gone. She stood up, shielding her eyes from the sun, scanning the area, told herself Maria had just moved to get a better view. Maybe she had gone to the other side of the fountain. Maybe she was watching the acrobat now. Told herself not to panic. Every parent knows that moment, that split second between where is she and where is she. Linda called out, Maria. Maria Chen, her voice calm at first. Then, louder, Maria, honey, where are you? No answer. By 11:41 a.m., Linda was walking quickly toward the fountain, her heart starting to race, her hands starting to shake, still telling herself there was a reasonable explanation, still believing that any second now she would see that yellow sundress, that bright smile, that stuffed white rabbit. David, she called back to her husband. David, I do not see Maria. By 11:42 a.m., David was on his feet, phone in hand, already looking around with growing concern. Kevin dropped his comic book and started jogging toward the fountain. By 11:43 a.m., Linda was running, pushing through crowds, screaming Maria's name at the top of her lungs, no longer caring who stared, no longer caring about making a scene. David joined her, phone already pressed to his ear, dialing 911 with shaking fingers. Kevin started checking behind trees, under benches, in bushes, anywhere a small child might hide, might be playing a game, might be trying to scare them. But here is what would later terrify investigators about this case. What would make this one of the most disturbing child abduction cases in New York history? Maria Chen did not wander off. She did not get lost. She did not chase a balloon or follow a puppy or any of the innocent explanations parents pray for in those first horrifying moments. She did not have a seizure or fall into the lake or any of the tragic accidents that sometimes happen. Maria vanished without a trace in broad daylight, surrounded by hundreds of witnesses in one of the most surveilled public spaces in America. She disappeared from a location with 47 security cameras within a 3-block radius. 47 different angles. 47 different chances to see what happened. And nobody saw a thing. Well, almost nobody. Because 12 years later, when investigators finally pieced together what really happened that Sunday morning, they would discover that someone did see everything. Someone was watching the entire time. Someone who had been planning this moment for months, studying the cameras, learning the blind spots, waiting for the perfect opportunity. And that person, they were closer to the Chen family than anyone could have imagined. Stay with me, because what I am about to tell you about the first 72 hours of this investigation will show you exactly how a child can disappear in plain sight, how the system can fail, how investigators can follow every protocol and still come up empty. and why this case became one of those unsolved cases that haunted the NYPD for over a decade before finally becoming one of the most shocking revelations in true crime history. The NYPD received the 911 call at 11:44 a.m. Missing child, Central Park, 6 years old, female, Asian American, yellow sundress, white sandals, pink shoe laces, carrying a white stuffed rabbit. Last seen at Bethesda Fountain approximately 3 minutes ago. Before I continue with what happened next, if you are finding this case as disturbing as I am, hit that like button and subscribe to Missing Innocence for more shocking revelations about missing children cases that left families haunted for years. We cover cold cases, solved mysteries, and the true crime stories that prove hope never dies. Because trust me, this story is just beginning, and where it goes will shock you in ways you cannot imagine. The first patrol car arrived at 11:49 a.m. 5 minutes response time. Officer Marcus Johnson and Officer Sarah Park. They immediately began a preliminary search while calling for backup. By 11:52 a.m., 3 more patrol cars had arrived. Within 8 minutes of the initial 911 call, 12 officers were on scene conducting an organized search pattern. Within 20 minutes, they had sealed off a 6-block radius around Bethesda Fountain, stopping everyone from leaving, checking bogs, looking in vehicles, questioning anyone who matched witness descriptions. Within 1 hour, over 100 officers were conducting a grid search of Central Park's 843 acres. This was not just another missing child case. The NYPD treats child abductions with extreme urgency because they know the statistics. In cases of child abduction by strangers, 74% of children who are murdered are killed within the first 3 hours. The first few hours are everything. Every minute counts. Every second could be the difference between finding a child alive or finding a body. Detective Sarah Rodriguez was the lead investigator assigned to the case. 42 years old, 17 years of experience with the NYPD's Missing Persons Squad. She had worked dozens of child disappearance cases, found some alive, found some dead, had nightmares about the ones never found. But years later, in an interview she gave after Maria was found, she would say this case felt different from the start. The parents were too calm, Rodriguez told reporters in 2020. Not calm like guilty. Not the fake calm of parents who hurt their own child and are trying to cover it up. We see that sometimes, unfortunately, but this was different. Calm like shock, like their brains could not process what was happening, like they were still waiting to wake up from a nightmare. Linda Chun kept saying the same thing over and over. She is here. She has to be here. She could not have left. She would not leave Mr. Whiskers. She would never leave Mr. Whiskers. Over and over, like a prayer, like if she said it enough times, it would be true. The first critical piece of evidence was discovered at 12:17 p.m. 33 minutes after Maria was reported missing. A pink shoelace, lying on the grass near the north side of Bethesda Terrace, about 40 feet from where the street performers had been. Exactly where witnesses would later say they saw a girl matching Maria's description standing and watching. Linda Chun identified it immediately, her hand shaking as she held it. Those were Maria's shoelaces, the special ones from Grandmother Chun. The double knot was exactly how her grandmother tied them, tight enough that Maria could never untie them herself. Maria had complained about it that morning, said they were too tight. Linda had told her they needed to be tight so they would not come undone. But here's what made investigators' blood run cold. What made Detective Rodriguez immediately escalate this from a possible runaway to a confirmed abduction. The shoelace had been cut cleanly, precisely, with scissors or a knife. Not torn, not untied, not broken from Maria pulling against it. Cut. You could see the clean edge under a magnifying glass. Someone had sliced through it deliberately. Someone had removed that shoelace deliberately. Someone had taken the time in broad daylight, surrounded by witnesses, to kneel down next to a 6-year-old girl and cut a shoelace off her shoe with enough precision that they did not cut her foot or her other lace. Why? What kind of kidnapper takes the time to remove a shoelace? Why not just grab the child and run? The immediate theory was that Maria had been grabbed, tried to run, and the shoelace got caught on something during the struggle. But that theory did not match the evidence. There were no other signs of a struggle in the area. No disturbed grass. No dropped items. No screaming reported by witnesses. No disturbance in the crowd that anyone remembered. The second theory was more chilling, more disturbing, more in line with what behavioral analysts know about certain types of predators. The perpetrator cut the shoelace as a trophy, a souvenir. The kind of thing serial predators do. The kind of thing organized, calculating abductors take to remember their victims, to relive the moment, to feel powerful. If that theory was correct, they were not looking for an opportunistic kidnapper who grabbed a child on impulse. They were looking for someone who had planned this, someone who had thought about it, someone who might have done it before. Detective Rodriguez ordered an immediate expansion of the investigation. They started pulling security camera footage from every business, every building, every traffic light within a 10-block radius. They started interviewing every single person who was in Central Park that day, taking names and contact information, following up on every lead. They deployed K-9 units trained in tracking missing persons. They brought in FBI behavioral analysts. They started preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. By 3 p.m. that afternoon, they had reviewed footage from 47 security cameras. And here is where this case became truly baffling for investigators, where this went from a difficult case to a seemingly impossible one. The cameras showed Maria walking toward the fountain at 11:23 a.m. Clear as day. You could see her yellow sundress, see her clutching Mr. See her skipping, happy, innocent, completely unaware that her life was about to change forever. They showed her standing near a street performer at 11:26 a.m., watching a magic act, laughing, clapping her hands, holding Mr. Whiskers up so the rabbit could see the tricks too. They showed her turning to wave at her mother at 11:28 a.m. That wave, that Linda would replay in her mind 10,000 times, looking for any sign that something was wrong, any indication that Maria was scared or uncomfortable. And then, at exactly 11:31 a.m., Maria Chen walked out of frame. Calmly, not running, not being dragged, not being carried. She walked, her yellow sundress the last thing visible as she moved toward the north side of the terrace. And then she was gone. 8 cameras covered the area where Maria disappeared. 8 different angles. Overlapping coverage, the kind of surveillance that should make it impossible for someone to vanish. And not one of them captured what happened next. Not one showed her leaving the park. Not one showed an adult with her. It was like she stepped into a blind spot in reality and evaporated. Whoever took her knew those cameras, Rodriguez would later say in court testimony. They knew exactly where to stand, exactly where the coverage gaps were, exactly how to move through Central Park without being seen. This was not opportunistic. This was not someone who saw a vulnerable child and acted on impulse. This was planned, researched, practiced. We were dealing with someone who had studied that location, who knew how to become invisible. By sunset on May 18, 2008, the NYPD had interviewed over 300 witnesses. They had collected DNA samples from the shoelace, from the surrounding grass, from anything that might contain trace evidence. They had deployed K-9 units across all 843 acres of Central Park. The dogs picked up Maria's scent near the fountain, tracked it toward the north side, and then lost it completely at the edge of the park near West 72nd Street, like she had been picked up and carried or put into a vehicle. They had shut down subway stations and deployed officers to check every train car. They had set up checkpoints on every major road out of Manhattan, stopping vehicles, looking in trunks, showing photos to drivers. They had contacted the Port Authority, the bridges, the tunnels, making sure no one matching Maria's description left the city. And they had exactly 0 solid leads. Dozens of possible sightings, hundreds of tips, but nothing concrete. Nothing that pointed to a specific perpetrator. Nothing that told them where Maria Chen had gone. Maria Chen had been missing for 9 hours. And statistically, investigators knew what that meant. The window was closing. Fast. But the statistics do not account for everything. They do not account for cases where the truth is stranger and more disturbing than anyone imagined. Cases where missing children are not killed in the first 3 hours, but instead are kept alive hidden, transformed into someone else entirely. The clock was ticking, but what investigators did not know was that time worked differently in this case. Because Maria was not dead. She was beginning a 12-year journey through a psychological nightmare that would reshape her identity, erase her memories, and turn her into a completely different person. That night, at 8 p.m., exactly 8 hours and 16 minutes after Maria disappeared, Linda and David Chun held their first press conference. If you have ever watched parents of missing children speak to cameras, you know that look, that desperate, broken, pleading look, that expression that says, please, please, someone must know something. Someone must have seen something. Please help us find our child. The press room at NYPD headquarters was packed. Every major news outlet, local stations, national networks, print journalists, photographers. The room was hot from all the camera lights, the air thick with anticipation and dread. Linda stood at the microphone, David's arm around her shoulders, keeping her upright. She was wearing the same clothes from the picnic, still had grass stains on her knees from crawling around Bethesda Fountain looking for clues. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Her voice shook as she spoke. She read from a prepared statement, her hands trembling so hard the paper rattled. But then she looked up at the cameras, looked directly into the lenses, and said 7 words that would be replayed on every news channel for weeks. That would become the soundbite everyone remembered. Please, just bring our baby home. 4 words, pause, 3 words. But the way she said them, the crack in her voice, the absolute devastation in her eyes, it broke something in everyone watching. Please, just bring our baby home. The media frenzy began immediately. By 9 p.m., the story was leading every news broadcast in the tri-state area. By 10 p.m., CNN had picked it up. By 11 p.m., it was national news. By midnight, it was trending on social media worldwide. Vanished in Central Park. The search for Maria Chen. The mystery of the pink shoelace. A mother's plea. Every network had their own angle, their own dramatic title, their own way of packaging grief into digestible segments between commercials. The case had everything the media loves. Young innocent victim with a gap-toothed smile and a stuffed rabbit. Mysterious circumstances that seemed impossible. Devastated family that looked wholesome and sympathetic. Iconic location that everyone knew. It was the perfect storm of true crime elements. By the next morning, Tuesday, May 19th, Maria's face was everywhere. And I mean everywhere. Missing person posters on every street corner, every bodega window, every subway car, Amber Alert on every phone in the New York metropolitan area. Billboards across the city showing her school photo, that yellow sundress, Mr. Wisp, digital screens in Times Square flashing her image to millions of tourists. The NYPD tip line received over 2,000 calls in the first 24 hours. The Find Maria Chen Facebook page, started by Linda's sister, gained 50,000 followers in 48 hours. Donations poured in for the reward fund, $5,000 the first day, $10,000 by day 2. By the end of the week, the reward for information leading to Maria's safe return had reached $100,000. The community response was overwhelming. Thousands of volunteers showed up to help with search parties. They combed through Central Park again. They searched neighboring parks. They checked every dumpster, every abandoned building, every place a small body might be hidden. I hate that I have to say it that way. But that is the reality of these cases. After the first day, you are searching for a living child. After the first week, you are also searching for a body. Churches held vigils. Schools sent letters home to parents. Community centers posted flyers. Everyone in New York City, it seemed, was looking for Maria Chen. But here is the dark reality of missing children cases. Something Detective Rodriguez had learned over 17 years of working these investigations. With massive public attention comes massive misdirection. Signal gets lost in noise. Real leads get buried under false ones. The NYPD hotline was not just flooded with tips. It was drowning in them. Thousands of calls. Most were well-intentioned but useless. I saw a girl who looked like Maria at a grocery store in Queens, but I did not talk to her. I had a dream about a basement in Brooklyn, and I think Maria might be there. I think my neighbor is suspicious because he looks at children weird. My coworker mentioned something about Central Park last week, and now I am worried. Every single call had to be logged. Triaged, investigated, if it seemed credible. It took manpower, time, resources, energy that could have been spent on real leads got spent chasing ghosts. But some tips were more disturbing than just useless. Some tips were actively harmful. False confessions started coming in on day 3, day 4, day 5. They never stopped. People claiming they took Maria, people describing in graphic detail what they did to her, where they hid her, how they killed her. People who were nowhere near Central Park that day but wanted attention, wanted to feel important, wanted to insert themselves into the biggest story in the city. Some were attention seekers. Some were mentally ill. Some were just cruel. But each confession had to be investigated. Each one had to be verified or debunked. Each one meant detectives had to stop what they were doing, bring someone in for questioning, check alibis, verify locations, and each one gave the Chun family false hope followed by crushing disappointment. Linda would hear that someone confessed. Her heart would leap. Finally, answers. Finally, closure. And then, hours later, investigators would determine it was fake. The person had an alibi. They got details wrong. They were just seeking attention. It was torture, a special kind of torture that only families of missing children understand. 3 days into the investigation, police got their first real suspect. Not a false confessor, not a vague tip. A real, credible suspect with motive, opportunity, and a history that made everyone's skin crawl. A man named Marcus Webb, 42 years old, registered sex offender. Level 3, the highest level, the kind reserved for predators considered most likely to reiv, had been convicted 10 years earlier for attempted abduction of a minor in New Jersey. Served 6 years, released on parole, living in Manhattan, and security camera footage showed him in Central Park on May 18, 2008, the day Maria disappeared. Not just in Central Park, near Bethesda Fountain. At approximately the same time Maria vanished. Detective Rodriguez personally led the team that brought Marcus Webb in for questioning on May 21st. She had worked child abduction cases long enough to know the profile. She had interviewed dozens of predators. She knew how they thought, how they operated, how they justified their actions to themselves. Marcus Webb sat across from her in the interrogation room, sweating despite the air conditioning, fidgeting with his hands, not making eye contact, all the classic signs of guilt or at least discomfort. Rodriguez started with simple questions. Where were you on Sunday, May 18th? What were you doing in Central Park? Did you see a little Asian American girl in a yellow sundress? The kinds of questions designed to establish a baseline before moving to harder stuff. And then Marcus Webb admitted something that made everyone's blood run cold, that made the officers watching through the one-way glass look at each other with expressions that said, "We have got him." He had been watching Maria Chen that day. He admitted it freely, said he had followed her family from the parking area to their picnic spot near Bethesda Terrace, said he had been standing less than 20 feet away when Maria went to watch the street performers, said he had been watching her the whole time. The room went silent. Rodriguez felt her heartbeat quicken. This was it. They had him. After 3 days of dead ends and false leads, they finally had the person who took Maria Chen. But what Marcus Webb told them next would change the entire direction of the investigation, would make them realize they had been looking for completely the wrong type of suspect from the very beginning. Because Marcus Webb did not take Maria Chen, but he saw who did. And when he described the person he saw, when he gave details that would later be corroborated by other witnesses and by security, footage they had not focused on yet, Detective Rodriguez realized they were dealing with something far more unusual than a typical stranger abduction. They were dealing with something that would become one of the most psychologically complex child abduction cases in American history. If you are still with me, comment below what you think happened to Maria. Did you catch the clue I dropped earlier about who was watching the family? I read every single comment, and I am curious what your theory is right now, because I guarantee you, whatever you are thinking, the truth is stranger. Marcus Webb sat across from Detective Rodriguez, wiped sweat from his forehead, and said something no one expected. It was not a man. It was a woman. Rodriguez leaned forward. Say that again. The person who took the little girl. It was not a man. It was a woman, mid-30s, Asian, shoulder length, black hair, straight, no bangs. She was wearing a green jacket, like a windbreaker type thing, and jeans. Dark blue jeans, white sneakers. I remember because I thought she was the mother at first. I thought maybe the family was leaving, and that was why the little girl was walking away with her. You thought she was Maria's mother. Webb nodded, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed. Yeah, the little girl, Maria, she walked right up to this woman, smiled at her, took her hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like she knew her, like she trusted her. There was no force, no grabbing, no struggle. The kid just took her hand and they walked away together. That is why I did not think anything was wrong at first. That is why nobody around them reacted. It looked completely normal. It looked like a mother and daughter leaving the park. This changed everything. The entire investigative focus had been on male predators. The profile of child abductors, especially stranger abductions, skews heavily male, over 90%. So every resource, every man-hour, every tip line operator had been filtering information through that lens, looking for suspicious men. Men with histories, men acting strangely around children, but a woman. An Asian woman who Maria seemed to know and trust. That was a completely different profile that opened up completely different possibilities, which meant one terrifying thing. Maria did not just encounter a stranger. She knew her abductor, or at least she thought she did. Detective Rodriguez spent the next 6 hours with Marcus Webb, going over every detail, every observation, building a complete picture, and despite his criminal history, despite every instinct telling her not to trust a registered sex offender, Webb's story held up. His timeline matched the security footage. His descriptions matched other witness accounts that they had initially dismissed as irrelevant. He was not their kidnapper. He was their most important witness. Within hours, a forensic sketch artist named Patricia Chun, no relation to the family, worked with Marcus Webb to create a composite drawing of the woman he saw. They went through books of facial features, different nose shapes, different eye shapes, different mouth shapes, building the face piece by piece. The sketch was completed at 11 p.m. on May 21st, 3 days after Maria disappeared. And the moment it was done, the moment they held up that drawing, something shifted in the investigation. Because the woman in the sketch did not look like a monster. She did not look like the kind of person who would kidnap a child. She looked normal, pleasant, trustworthy, the kind of person you would ask for directions, the kind of person you would let watch your child for a moment while you used the bathroom. That is what made her so dangerous. The sketch was released to the media that evening with an urgent message. Have you seen this woman? She is wanted for questioning in connection with the disappearance of Maria Chen. If you have any information, please contact the NYPD tip line immediately. Do not approach her yourself. She may be dangerous. The response was immediate and overwhelming. By midnight, they had received over 500 tips about possible identities. By morning, over 2,000 women who looked similar, women who had been acting strangely, women with histories of mental illness, women who had lost children and might be unstable. But one tip stood out from all the others. One phone call that came in at 11:47 p.m. on May 21st, just hours after the sketch was released, a woman named Patricia Brennan called the hotline. She was crying so hard, the operator could barely understand her. She kept saying the same thing over and over. "That is my sister. Oh my God, that is my sister. That is Ellen." The operator tried to calm her down, get coherent information. "Ma'am, I need you to slow down. What is your sister's name?" "Helen Zhao." "That sketch, that is her face. That is my sister. But she does not have children. She has never had children. She cannot have children. Why would she take someone else's child?" Patricia Brennan could not finish the sentence. She was sobbing too hard, but she did not need to. The operator was already flagging the call as priority, already transferring it to Detective Rodriguez's direct line. By midnight, Rodriguez had Patricia Brennan at NYPD headquarters. By 1 a.m., they had Helen Zhao's full background, and what they found made the entire investigation pivot in a direction no one had anticipated. Helen Zhao, 34 years old, born in Queens to Taiwanese immigrant parents, grew up middle class, normal childhood, good student, graduated from nursing school at NYU, worked as a pediatric nurse at New York Presbyterian Hospital for 8 years, specialized in neonatal intensive care, babies, sick babies, the most vulnerable patients imaginable. No criminal record, not even a Perkin ticket. No history of mental illness documented in any system they could access. No complaints at her job, no red flags whatsoever. By every metric, Helen Zhao was an upstanding citizen, a healthcare professional, someone who dedicated her life to helping children, not hurting them. But when detectives started digging deeper into Helen's personal history, they discovered something that made their investigation take a sharp turn, something that provided a possible motive for the seemingly impossible. Helen Zhao had suffered a miscarriage 3 years earlier, in 2005, but not just a miscarriage. She had been carrying twins, girls. She had been 17 weeks pregnant, far enough along that she had already decorated a nursery, bought tiny clothes, picked out names, Emma and Grace. She had lost them both in one devastating night. According to hospital records that took a court order to access, Helen had nearly died herself, required emergency surgery that left her unable to have children ever again. At 31 years old, her dream of becoming a mother was ripped away forever. Helen, according to her sister Patricia, Helen had never fully recovered from that loss. Not physically. She healed fine from that. But mentally, emotionally, she was destroyed. She became obsessed with children. Patricia told police during a 4-hour interview. She would volunteer extra shifts in the pediatric ward. She would go to parks just to watch kids play. She would follow mothers with strollers in the grocery store just to be near babies. Our family thought it was her way of coping. We thought it was her way of staying connected to what she had lost. We thought it was healthy. We thought she was healing. We had no idea it was getting worse. Patricia started crying again. We had no idea she was planning something like this. If I had known, if I had had any clue, I would have done something. I would have gotten her help. I would have told someone, "You have to believe me." Specifically learning her routine, seeing who picked her up, understanding the family's patterns. Helen had been studying them, learning their habits, building a relationship in her mind even though they had never actually met. By the time she approached Maria in Central Park, Helen probably felt like she already knew the family, like she was already part of Maria's life. But here is where the investigation hit a massive wall, a dead end that would stump investigators for 12 years. When police went to Helen Zhao's apartment in Astoria, Queens, based on the address from her work records, she was gone. Not just out for the day. Gone. The apartment was empty. Completely empty. No furniture, no clothes, no personal items, No dishes in the cabinets, no toiletries in the bathroom. The walls had clean squares where pictures had hung. The floors had indentations from furniture. But everything was gone, like she had never lived there at all. The landlord confirmed that Helen had given notice 3 weeks earlier, paid to break her lease, and moved out on May 5th, 3 days before Maria disappeared. She had been planning this for weeks, possibly months. Her credit cards had not been used since May 17th, the day before Maria disappeared. She had withdrawn $8,000 in cash from her bank account over the previous month. Small amounts, $500 here, $300 there, never enough to trigger automatic reports. Her phone was disconnected as of May 16th. Her work had received a resignation letter 2 weeks earlier, dated May 5th, citing a family emergency out of state and immediate resignation. The hospital had been surprised but accepted it. She had been a good employee. They had no reason to question her. Helen Zhao had vanished just as completely as Maria Chen, and she had clearly been planning it for a long time. For the next 3 months, Helen became the most wanted person in New York. Her face was plastered on every news channel, every newspaper, every website. America's Most Wanted featured her case in June 2008. The FBI joined the investigation, expanding the search nationwide, checking border crossings into Canada and Mexico, monitoring airports, train stations, bus terminals, but there was no trace of her. No credit card pings, no phone activity, no sightings that could be verified, no apartment leases in her name, no job applications, no hospital records. It was like she had stepped off the edge of the earth, taking Maria with her, leaving behind nothing but grief and questions. The Chen family was in agony. Every day without answers was another day of torture. Every night Linda would lie awake wondering where her daughter was. Was she scared? Was she crying for her mother? Was she being hurt? Or worse, was she had already gone, her body hidden somewhere they would never find? Detective Rodriguez did believe her, because this fit a profile they recognized. Not the profile of a predatory stranger abduction, but something else entirely. Something rarer, but equally devastating. Helen Zhao was not a predator. She was a grieving mother who had lost her grip on reality, who had convinced herself that she deserved a child, that she could take someone else's child and make it her own, that she could fill the hole inside her by stealing someone else's daughter. It is called substitution abduction. Dr. Leonard Martinez, an FBI behavioral analyst brought in on the case, explained to the investigative team, it is when someone who has lost a child or who desperately wants a child and cannot have one kidnaps a child to replace what they have lost. They do not see it as kidnapping. They see it as saving, as rescuing, as finally getting what they deserve. Helen Zhao probably convinced herself that she would be a better mother than Maria's real mother, that Maria needed her, that this was meant to be. This profile explained several things that had not made sense before. Why Maria went willingly. Helen probably approached her kindly, maybe said she knew her mother, maybe said there was an emergency and she needed to help. 6-year-olds are taught to trust adults, especially women, especially nurses. Why there was no violence. Helen would not want to hurt her new daughter. She would want to comfort her, reassure her, make her feel safe. Why the shoelace was cut so carefully. Helen was a nurse. She had steady hands. She probably carried scissors in her bag for work. When Maria's shoelace got caught on something or started dragging, Helen would have instinctively fixed it rather than risk Maria tripping. Itte all fici. And it made the case both more understandable and more terrifying. Because if Helen saw herself as Maria's new mother, she would not hurt her. Maria was probably alive, but Helen would also do everything possible to keep her, to hide her, to make sure no one ever found them. Investigators pulled Helen's phone records, credit card statements, work schedules, everything they could access. What they discovered was a pattern that had been completely invisible until now, but once they saw it, seemed obvious and horrifying. For 6 months before Maria's disappearance, Helen Zhao had been following the Chen family, stalking them, though that word would not be used in court documents until much later. She had taken the same subway line as Linda Chun every Tuesday and Thursday, when Linda worked the day shift at Mount Sinai Hospital. She had been on the same car 17 different times, always standing at the other end, watching Linda without being noticed. Linda had never recognized her, because why would she? Just another commuter on a crowded train. She had been to David Chun's bakery in Chinatown 23 times over 6 months, sometimes buying a single egg tart, sometimes just browsing, always watching the family photos on the wall, the pictures of Maria, learning about her, studying her, preparing. She had walked past PS 334 Elementary School, where Maria attended first grade, at least a dozen times during pickup hours, standing across the street with a coffee, pretending to be on her phone, watching the children pour out of the building. Wachi? Maria. Linda stopped working, took a leave of absence from the hospital that eventually became permanent. She could not focus, could not function, spent her days organizing search parties and her nights walking through Central Park, retracing those 73 steps over and over. David kept the bakery open but barely functioned. He would burn batches of buns because he forgot they were in the oven. He would mix up orders. He would stand at the counter staring at nothing, lost in memories of Maria helping him shape dough, her little hands covered in flour. Kevin, Maria's 12-year-old brother, started having nightmares. Violent nightmares where he was in Central Park watching Maria disappear, but his legs would not work and he could not run to save her. He developed panic attacks, started skipping school, withdrew from friends. His grades dropped. He started seeing a therapist twice a week but barely spoke during the sessions. The marriage strained under the weight of grief. David blamed himself for not watching more carefully. Linda blamed herself for letting Maria go to the fountain alone. They blamed each other during fights that ended with both of them crying. They almost did not make it through the first year. 1 year passed. May 18th, 2009, the first anniversary of Maria's disappearance. They held a vigil at Bethesda Fountain. Hundreds of people showed up. Candles, flowers, yellow balloons released into the sky. Strangers hugging Linda and David, telling them they were praying, telling them not to give up hope. But the investigation had gone cold. The FBI scaled back resources. The daily tip line calls dropped from hundreds to dozens. The media coverage faded. Maria became yesterday's news, another missing child in a country where hundreds of thousands of children go missing every year. Then 2 years. Then 3. Then 5. Maria's case officially went cold in 2013, 5 years after she vanished. The massive search operations ended. The dedicated task force was disbanded. Detective Rodriguez was reassigned to new cases, though she kept Maria's file on her desk, kept hoping for a break. The media attention faded almost completely. The volunteers stopped calling. The donations dried up. The Find Maria Chen Facebook page went from daily updates to weekly to monthly to silence. The Chen family was left alone with their grief and their unanswered questions. But Linda Chen never stopped searching, never stopped hoping, never stopped believing. Every morning, rain or shine, summer or winter, Linda would walk the same path through Central Park, 73 steps from where they had their picnic to where Maria disappeared. She would stand at Bethesda Fountain for exactly 11 minutes, the amount of time Maria had been gone before they noticed. She would scan the crowd, looking for a yellow sundress, looking for a gap-toothed smile, looking for her daughter. Other morning joggers got used to seeing her there. Some would nod respectfully. Most avoided her, not wanting to intrude on her grief. Other parents of missing children told her she needed to move on. Support groups talked about acceptance and healing and learning to live with uncertainty. Therapists gently suggested she was stuck in her grief, that she needed to consider the possibility that Maria might never come home. But Linda refused to believe her daughter was dead, refused to accept that she would never know what happened, refused to move on. "I would know," she told a reporter in 2012, 4 years after Maria vanished, during a brief resurgence of media interest on the anniversary. The interview aired on the local news. "A mother would know if her child was gone. I can still feel her. She is out there somewhere. She is alive." I just need to find her. And I will. Even if it takes the rest of my life, I will find my daughter. What Linda did not know, what nobody knew, was that she had been right all along, that her mother's instinct was correct. Maria was alive. She had been alive this entire time, and she had been living just 8 miles away in Astoria, Queens, the entire time. Walking past her old life without knowing it, taking the same subway lines as her real mother without recognizing her. But the truth about where she had been, what had happened to her, and who Helen Zhao really was in Maria's new life would remain hidden for 7 more years. 7 more years of Linda walking through Central Park every morning. 7 more years of David making sesame buns that reminded him of his daughter. 7 more years of Kevin living in the shadow of the sister everyone forgot he had lost to, until a seemingly unrelated event in 2020 would finally crack this case wide open in the most unexpected way possible. Because on March 14, 2020, just as the world was shutting down for a pandemic, just as New York City was becoming a ghost town of masks and closed businesses in fear, a high school senior named Emma Zhao walked into her mother's bedroom and found something that did not make sense. A box hidden in the back of her mother's closet. A box she had never seen before. A box labeled important documents in her mother's handwriting. Inside were old photographs, dozens of them. Pictures of a little girl who looked nothing like Emma. A little girl with lighter skin and different features. A little girl in a yellow sundress holding a stuffed white rabbit. A little girl who looked happy and loved and completely unaware that someone was taking pictures of her from a distance. And when Emma looked closer at one of the photos, when she turned it over with trembling hands, she saw something written on the back in her mother's distinctive handwriting. My Maria, finally mine. Forever. Emma's hands started shaking. Her breath caught in her throat. Her mind started racing through possibilities, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Maria. Not Emma. Maria. Emma Zhao had lived her entire 17 years believing she was Helen Zhao's biological daughter. Her mother had told her that her father died in a car accident before she was born, that they had moved from California to New York when Emma was just a baby, that they kept to themselves because her father's family had been abusive and dangerous and they needed to stay hidden to stay safe. Emma had believed all of it. Why would not she? Children believe their parents. Children trust the only reality they have ever known. She had no idea that her real name was Maria Chen. No idea that she had been kidnapped from Central Park when she was 6 years old. No idea that somewhere in New York City, a family had been searching for her, grieving for her, never giving up hope of finding her. And she had no memory of any of it. No memory of a life before Helen. No memory of Linda and David and Kevin. No memory of that Sunday in the park. Nothing. Or so she thought. Because, as Emma stood there holding that photograph, staring at the little girl in the yellow sundress, something happened in her brain. Something cracked open. A wall she did not know existed started to crumble. She felt a sensation she could not name. A sense of recognition that felt both impossible and undeniable. Like looking at a picture of yourself from a past life, like remembering a dream you had forgotten the moment you woke up. And then, just for a second, just for a fleeting moment, she smelled something. Sesame. Fresh-baked sesame buns. The smell was so real, so vivid, that she turned around expecting to see someone baking. But she was alone in her mother's bedroom. The smell was a memory from a life she did not remember living. Emma's heart was pounding. Her hands were sweating. She turned on her laptop with shaking fingers and did what any teenager would do in 2020 when faced with something impossible. She Googled it. She typed the words carefully, not entirely sure what she was searching for. Maria Chen missing. And there it was. Hundreds of articles. Thousands of search results. News reports from 2008 that she had never seen. Missing person posters that made her stomach drop. A case that had captivated the nation 12 years ago. A 6-year-old girl named Maria Chen who vanished from Central Park on May 18, 2008. A girl who looked exactly like the child in the photographs. A girl whose age now, if she were still alive, would be exactly 17 years old. the same age as Emma. Emma clicked on the first news article. It was from May 19th, 2008. The headline read, 6-year-old girl vanishes from Central Park in broad daylight. Hundreds search for missing child. There was a photo, Maria's kindergarten picture, and Emma felt her world tilt sideways because she recognized that face. Not because it looked like her, though it did, but because she had seen that exact photo before in her mother's things. Hidden away. She clicked on a video, a press conference from May 18th, 2008, the night Maria disappeared. A woman appeared on screen. Asian, about 40 years old, eyes red from crying, standing at a podium surrounded by microphones. Linda Chun, Maria's mother, Maria's real mother. Linda spoke, her voice breaking. Please, if anyone has seen our daughter, if anyone knows anything, please help us bring her home. Maria, if you can hear this, Mommy and Daddy love you so much. We are looking for you. We will never stop looking for you. And when Linda said Maria's name, when she said it with such love and such pain, something happened in Emma's brain that she could not explain. A flash of memory, hazy, distant, like watching a movie through thick fog. A woman's voice singing in Mandarin, a lullaby she could not quite remember but somehow knew, the smell of sesame buns baking, the feeling of small hands shaping dough, a boy reading comic books on a couch, a yellow sundress that was her favorite because it had pockets, fragments, pieces, memories that did not belong to Emma. Zhao but somehow existed in her mind anyway. Emma watched video after video, read article after article, saw the timeline of the investigation, saw the sketch of the suspect that was released on May 21st, and she saw her mother's face staring back at her from a wanted poster. Helen Zhao, wanted for questioning in connection with the disappearance of Maria Chen. Emma could not breathe, could not think. Her entire world was shattering around her. She heard the apartment door open, heard her mother, Helen, call out that she was home from work, heard footsteps coming down the hallway. Emma Zhao closed her laptop, picked up the photograph, walked into the living room where Helen was taking off her nurse's scrubs, tired from a long shift at the hospital, and she asked a question that would finally, after 12 years, bring Maria Chen home. Mom? She held up the photograph. Who is this little girl? And who am I really? Helen Zhao froze. The color drained from her face, her hands started shaking. And in that moment, Emma knew, she knew that everything her mother had ever told her was a lie. She knew that her entire life was built on a foundation of stolen identity and forced amnesia. She knew that she was Maria Chen, the missing child, the vanished girl, the case that had never been solved. And she knew that the woman she had called Mom her entire life was the person who had destroyed her real family and erased her past. Tell me the truth, Emma said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tears streaming down her face. Tell me the truth right now, or I am calling the police. And Helen Zhao, the woman who had been living in fear of this moment for 12 years, the woman who had hidden Maria in plain sight for over a decade, finally broke down and told the truth. March 14th, 2020, 7:42 p.m. Emma Zhao called 911 with trembling hands while Helen sat on the couch crying, not trying to run, not trying to stop her. Just crying and saying over and over, I am sorry. I am so sorry. The 911 operator answered. 911, what is your emergency? Emma took a deep breath. My name is Emma Zhao, at least. That is what I have been called my whole life. But I just found out my real name might be Maria Chen. I think I am a missing person. I think my mother, the woman I have lived with my entire life, kidnapped me when I was 6 years old. There was a pause on the line. Ma'am, can you repeat that? Emma did, slowly, carefully, giving her address in a saying that the woman who abducted her was here right now, saying she needed police immediately, saying she was not in danger, Helen was not violent, but this needed to be handled now before her brain could process what was happening, and she fell apart completely. The operator stayed on the line, kept Emma talking, kept her calm. Dispatched units immediately. Within 20 minutes, 2 NYPD detectives were at Helen Zhao's apartment, Detective Michael Torres and Detective Jennifer Kim. They had been briefed on the way over. Possible match to the Maria Chen case from 2008, 12-year-old cold case. Potential break. They expected a hostage situation, maybe expected resistance, expected complexity. What they found was a 17-year-old girl sitting calmly on a couch next to a 34-year-old woman who was crying but not fighting, who opened the door willingly, who said immediately, "I want to confess everything. I want to tell the truth. I have been carrying this for 12 years and I cannot anymore." Helen Zhao was arrested at 8:03 p.m. Read her Miranda rights. She waived them immediately, said she wanted to talk, wanted to explain, needed to explain. By 9 p.m., they were at NYPD headquarters. Emma in one room with a victim advocate and a child psychologist. Helen in an interrogation room with detectives and recording equipment. By 10 p.m., they had contacted Detective Sara Rodriguez, who had been the original lead investigator in 2008. She had retired 2 years earlier, but had given standing instructions that if anything ever broke in the Maria Chen case, contact her immediately, day or night. Rodriguez was there by 10:30. Walked into that interrogation room, looked at Helen Zhao, and felt 12 years of frustration and grief and determination culminate in this single moment. "Is Maria alive?" Rodriguez asked before anyone could say anything else. Before reading rights or taking statements. "Is she alive?" Helen nodded, tears streaming. "Yes, she is alive. She is here. Emma. Her name is Emma now. She does not remember being Maria. I made sure she would not remember." And then Helen Zhao confessed everything. Not because she was forced, not because she was offered a deal, but because, as she later told court-appointed psychologists, she was relieved. Carrying that secret for 12 years had been destroying her, living in fear every day that someone would recognize Emma, would recognize her, would figure it out. It had been a prison of her own making. Here is what Helen told detectives that night, and I am warning you, this gets dark. This gets into psychological manipulation that most people cannot even imagine is possible. Helen Zhao did not plan to kidnap Maria Chen. Not at first. Not consciously, anyway. She had been following the Chen family for months. Yes, but her original intention was different. Twisted but different. She wanted to be close to families with children, to observe them from a distance, to pretend, in her mind, that she could still be a mother, even though she could not have children of her own. After losing her twins, Emma and Grace, in 2005, Helen had fallen into severe clinical depression. She had been hospitalized twice for suicidal ideation. Once she had almost succeeded, took a bottle of pills, was found by her sister and rushed to the emergency room, had her stomach pumped. Spent 2 weeks in psychiatric care. Her marriage fell apart 6 months after the miscarriage. Her husband could not handle her grief, could not handle her obsession with babies, could not handle coming home to find her sitting in the decorated nursery crying. He left, filed for divorce, remarried within a year, moved to California and cut all contact. Helen lost everything she had built her identity around, being a wife, being a mother, having a family, having a future. "I felt empty," Helen told detectives, her voice hollow, like there was a hole inside me that would never be filled. Like I had died, but my body forgot to stop walking around. And every time I saw a child, especially little girls around the age my twins would have been, I felt this ache, this physical pain in my chest. Like my body was crying for children I would never hold. On May 18, 2008, Helen was at Central Park by what she claimed was coincidence. She had gotten into the habit of going to parks on weekends, sitting on benches, watching families, living vicariously through other people's happiness. She had been watching the Chum family from a distance for months at that point. Not planning anything, just watching, learning, about them, pretending in her mind that she was part of their family, that Maria was her daughter. It was fantasy, delusion, but it made the pain bearable. Maria. And then she saw Maria walk toward Bethesda Fountain, alone, saw her watching the street performers, saw her turning to wave at her mother, saw her standing there in that yellow sundress holding that stuffed rabbit. Something snapped in Helen's brain in that moment. Years of grief and loss and yearning crystallized into a single thought. She could be mine. Helen walked over before she had fully processed what she was doing, approached Maria gently, kindly, used her nurse voice, the soothing tone she had perfected working with scared children in hospitals. "Hi, sweetie. Are you here with your family?" Maria looked up at her and smiled. That gap-toothed smile, that innocent trust. "Yes, my mommy is right over there," she pointed. Helen's heart was pounding. She was committing, crossing a line, but she could not stop. The need was too strong, the emptiness too vast. "You seem like such a sweet girl. What is your name?" "Maria? That is a beautiful name." "My name is Helen. I am a nurse. I help take care of kids when they are sick. That is what my mommy does. She is a nurse too." The conversation continued. Helen asked about the street performers, asked if Maria wanted to get a closer look. Maria said yes, and when Helen held out her hand, Maria took it, because she had been taught to trust adults, because Helen seemed nice, because nurses were safe, because sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who look the least dangerous. They walked toward the north side of the terrace, away from Linda Chun's line of sight, into the blind spot Helen had noticed during her months of observation. And they kept walking. Maria started to realize something was wrong about 5 minutes later. They were near the edge of the park, near the street, too far from where her mother was. "Where are we going?" Maria asked, her voice getting worried. "I need to go back to my mommy." Helen knelt down to Maria's eye level, used her most comforting voice. "Sweetie, your mommy asked me to come get you. She said there was an emergency. Your daddy got hurt at the bakery and we need to go to the hospital to see him." Maria's eyes went wide. "My daddy is hurt. He is going to be okay," Helen lied smoothly. "But your mommy needs you to come with me so she can meet us there. Can you be a brave girl and come with me?" Maria hesitated. She was smart, suspicious, but she was also 6 years old, and being told her father was hurt, she made a choice that thousands of children make every day. She trusted an adult who seemed kind. "Okay," Maria said quietly, but she was scared now. "Can we call my mommy?" "We will, at the hospital," Helen promised. "Come on, let us go quickly so we can help your daddy." Helen had a car parked 2 blocks from Central Park. She had driven in that morning, planning to go to the Hamptons for a weekend trip. Instead, she drove to Pennsylvania with Maria in the back seat, crying quietly, asking when they would get to the hospital, when she could see her mommy. And that is when Helen's delusion deepened. When she fully committed to the lie, she was telling herself this was not kidnapping. This was rescue. This was becoming the mother she was meant to be. This was filling the hole inside her with someone who needed her. For the first 3 days, Helen kept Maria in a motel room in rural Pennsylvania. She was gentle, patient, kind. She did not hurt Maria, did not yell at her, did not threaten her. Instead, she used a technique that child psychologists would later identify as systematic identity replacement. Helen cut Maria's hair while Maria slept, crying the whole time, telling herself this was necessary, dyed it darker, changed her clothes, started calling her Emma instead of Maria. Every time Maria said her name was Maria, Helen gently corrected her. "No, sweetie, your name is Emma. You are confused. You hit your head and you are having trouble remembering. But I am your mommy, and I will help you remember the right things." Every time Maria cried for Linda and David, Helen said, "I am your mommy. You are confused, baby. Those people you are thinking of, they are not real. They are from a dream you had. I am real. I am your mommy. I love you." Over and over. Day after day week after week. 6-year-old brains are malleable, suggestible. When an authority figure, especially a parental figure, consistently tells a child that their memories are wrong, the child starts to doubt themselves. It is called gaslighting, but when done to a young child, it is even more effective and more damaging, because children do not have fully formed identities yet. They do not have years of solid memories to anchor themselves to. They believe adults. They need to believe adults to feel safe in the world. Helen moved constantly for the first 6 months. Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, never staying anywhere long enough for Maria to make friends or for neighbors to get suspicious. Always paying cash for everything. Never using her real name. Living on the $8,000 she had withdrawn before disappearing. And the whole time, she worked on Maria's mind. She told Maria that her old family had not wanted her, that they had given her away because they could not take care of her, that Helen was her new mother who actually loved her and wanted her. She showed Maria fake documents, a birth certificate she had forged with the name Emma Zhao, medical records she had created, a made-up story about being from California, about Emma's father dying in a car crash, about moving to New York for a fresh start. She created a complete, fabricated backstory, gave Emma false memories by describing events that never happened but repeating them so often that Emma started to believe she remembered them. Remember when you were 3 and we went to Disneyland? Remember your 4th birthday party with the princess cake? Remember when we got our cat whisk? She incorporated Maria's stuffed rabbit into the false narrative, renaming it, claiming they had had it since Emma was a baby, and slowly, heartbreakingly, it worked. The human mind is designed to create coherent narratives. When faced with conflicting information, especially as a child, the brain often chooses the narrative that is most consistently reinforced by authority figures. By age 7, Maria's memories of her real family had become hazy, dreamlike, unreal. She could not picture Linda and David's faces clearly anymore. She could not remember Kevin's name. The yellow sundress and the picnic in Central Park felt like something she had seen in a movie, not something she had lived. By age 8, she fully believed she was Emma Zhao, believed Helen was her biological mother, believed the life Helen had created for her was the only life she had ever known. By age 10, Maria Chen was gone, completely erased. Emma Zhao had taken her place. She could not remember the Chun family at all. They were ghosts, shadows, dreams that faded when she tried to grasp them. The only thing that remained were fragments that Emma could not explain, feelings without context, skills without memory of learning them. She felt comfortable with Mandarin even though Helen said they had never spoken it at home. Songs in Mandarin would make her cry without knowing why. She loved sesame buns, but eating them made her feel sad in a way she could not articulate. She had dreams sometimes, a boy with a comic book, a man with flour on his hands, a woman singing, but they were just dreams. Everyone has weird dreams. She had a gap between her front teeth that reminded her of something she could not remember. She had a constellation of freckles on her nose that she would trace sometimes, feeling like they meant something important, but she had no idea, no memory, no connection to who she had been. Helen had successfully erased Maria Chen and created Emma Zhao. It should have been impossible, but trauma, manipulation, and the plasticity of a child's brain made it horrifyingly possible. Before I tell you about Maria's reunion with her family, I need you to share this video. Share it with everyone you know. Because stories like this, stories about missing children found alive, give hope to thousands of families still searching. Your share could reach someone who needs to hear this. Linda Chun answered her phone at 9:17 p.m. on March 14, 2020. Mrs. Chun, this is Detective Michael Torres with the NYPD. I need you to sit down. Linda's heart stopped. After 12 years of false leads and dead ends, she knew that calls from the police were never good news. We found Maria. She is alive. Linda Chun's knees buckled. She dropped the phone. David came running from the kitchen when he heard her screaming. Not screaming in agony, screaming in joy, in disbelief, in relief so overwhelming it physically hurt. She is alive, Linda kept repeating. She is alive. Our baby is alive. But there was a complication, and Detective Torres had to explain it gently. Mrs. Chen, Maria has been living as someone else for 12 years. She does not remember you. Her name is Emma now, and she believes Helen Zhao is her mother. We need you to understand that when you see